Well, good morning. Now you should be seeing this, God willing, on Wednesday. I know it's a short day, and you've got mass this morning. Rest assured that I will be praying for you. Uh, Say a little prayer for me as well. Since we don't have much time, I want to dive right in. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite people, Thomas Merton. And we're going to talk about the big question of what is holiness? We said that the church is one, the church is holy, the church is Catholic, the church is apostolic. As we roll into chapter 3, we're going to talk about holiness. And the picture on your screen is one of the people that's been one of the great guides for my life in holiness, Thomas Merton, who that's his name. And then when he joined the monastery, he just became Father Lewis. If you go to the cemetery where he's buried, there's no mention of the famous Thomas Merton. There's just Father Lewis, one of the members of the community. So I'd kind of like to start out and ask you, what do you think it means to be holy? You know, we probably have all kinds of ideas and about what holiness looks like. You know, is it an attitude? Is it uh, the way we treat other people? And I think those are pieces of it. Those aren't really the holiness itself. And so holiness, I would say, is our desire to be like God, our desire to do all the things that are pleasing to Him, to be the best person that we can be, that the way He made us. And so I think that all of us in our lives kind of ask ourselves, what does it take to work for holiness? Do I have to be good all of the time? Can I do, what if I slip? Am I no longer holy? Does it mean I have to pray all the time? Many of us struggle to find enough time to pray. And I think the best advice I ever heard comes from one of the fathers of the church. One of his monks came to him and said, I'm very busy. I don't have time to pray the 30 minutes a day like you told me. And um, the wise elder says, oh, when you're so busy you don't have time to pray, that means you need to pray twice as long. I found that to be good advice. The days when I don't feel like praying is when I usually need it the most. Also, I think sometimes, depending on our religious circumstance, if you're kind of on the inside, does it mean doing things the way we've always done them? And we'll see in Thomas Merton that these aren't necessarily the keys to holiness. So I want to talk just real quickly about Thomas's life. So he was born in 1915, just a century ago. He was born to a family that wasn't particularly religious. They would have told you that they were Episcopalian, but, you know, Christmas and Easter on a good year would have described Thomas's family. He was a mediocre student. I mean, if God meant him to be a student, he failed, a good student, he failed epically. And especially as he got older, as he got to high school and particularly into college and to graduate school, there was a reason why he wasn't a good student, because he loved a good beer and he loved women a lot. Uh, Got into all kinds of things, and if you would have seen him on the street, you would have thought there is no chance that this guy will ever be will ever be a great model for us. 23, he discovered Catholicism and he was baptized. And sometimes when people come to the faith later in life, when they make that decision for themselves rather than their parents making it for them, they come into it with a passion that the rest of us maybe have to slowly build instead. And so he came in, he read everything he could. And because of that, the more he learned, he felt like he not only was called to be a Catholic, but he was called to be a member of a religious order. And he particularly loved the Franciscans. And the Franciscans are known for their simplicity of life. And they're also uh, people who are kind of out on the streets. They're people who really typically have a ministry amongst what we would call maybe the lower class. And he thought, this is where I belong. If I'm going to follow Jesus, and part of that was making up for the life that I've lived before, I should be a Franciscan. And the Franciscans looked first at his college transcript. They looked at things that they heard from other people, and they're like, we would not touch you with a 10-foot pole. You are not what we need. And so he was kind of devastated. And so he went on retreat in Gethsemane, Kentucky, or Trappist, Kentucky, at the Abbey of Gethsemane, which is out in the hills south of Bardstown. And a retreat is one of those times that yours won't be quite like this on Friday, where you step away from life, and which is what you'll do. But particularly when we get a little older, we step away to look at life and to have some time, particularly for silence and prayer. Uh, and so he went to spend some time with the Trappists, which is a group of particularly rigid ruled monks. And so he went to spend a little time on retreat there. And the things that really attracted him are what's called grand silence. The monks there overall don't talk to each other. They have a kind of sign language that they use most of the time, and they certainly talk at mass, and there are a few times when they do, but overall, you know, you're there with other people, but it's not to have a conversation. It's not to talk about the weather. And so it gives you time without that distraction to get to know God. One of the things that the monks do is something that is part of the ancient tradition of the church, is that the monks pray a lot. And so they get up in the middle of the night and pray. They pray at dawn. They pray mid-morning. They pray at lunchtime. They pray in the afternoon, right before dark. They pray before they go to bed. And that's in addition to going to mass every day. So there's lots of times when they pray. Uh, and again, those of us that have taken orders make a promise to pray at least, depending on the order, some of those. So I've committed to praying morning and evening, but many others, particularly those in a monastic community, pray all of those times a day. They've kind of softened it up depending on which group you belong to, that you don't have to get up at 3 a.m. to pray vigils. You can pray that when you get up before the first prayer of the day. But Thomas found this whole cycle of you're never more than a couple hours away from formal prayer very comforting. In between times of prayer, they work. Uh, the Trappists typically have made fudge. They have honey that they make, cheese, and a couple other things. So, as part of a monk's life, he might be caring for the cows who give the milk to make the cheese or whatever. So he found some comfort in that cycle of work, pray, work, pray, work, pray, and that there was just time. There was time by himself, time to really spend time with God without any distractions. And he fell in love with that. He thought these are the ways for me, Thomas Merton, to be in touch with God as holy as I can be. And so a couple years later, he joined the monastery. Now, if you look at this particular picture, this is one of my favorite pictures of Thomas Merton. You can see, and this was after he was a monk, you can see he's still got that, there's a joy in him, but there's a gleam in his eye that looks, you get just a hint of what a rounder he might have been as a college student. There's a joy, but even in monastic life, there's a little glint of something in those eyes that say he could have been trouble. One of the things that we sometimes do as part of a religious practice is journaling. What am I feeling? What have I discovered today? What did I see in myself or in other people? how did God touch me? And so he was asked to start journaling, and his journal entries were so powerful as he wrote about his life and what he was discovering that uh, his superior asked him to if they could publish those. And so he ended up publishing dozens of books over the course of his lifetime. And if you asked anybody, what all did Thomas Merton write? They're probably going to say, well, he wrote the Seven-Story Mountain, and that's all they're going to know. Because it's an extraordinary book. It tells the story of his life and how he's tried to find holiness. It's one of those books that I've read a number of times, and every time I read it, I learn something new about him and about myself. So, absolutely amazing piece of literature. But it's interesting that somebody who went away for solitude becomes a famous author. It, and so he did things kind of the way they've always been done, but God did something marvelous and new with that. He finds God certainly in being apart from the world, in being at the monastery. And so he kind of comes, he's like, this is what's worked so great for me, but does everybody have to do this? Is this the only way to holiness? And I think he realized that it's not something that you earn, that it's a gift, and that you receive it in your own unique way. And so the way I'm trying to find holiness is not the way you're going to. And even any given two of you are probably not going to find it in exactly the same way. And so that's part of the excitement of the call to holiness. So as I say here, his own monastic vocation called him to deeper holiness, but it didn't give him all the tools he needed. And so even though he craved this solitude, he lived as a hermit, even on the grounds of the monastery, even though he left that, and he left this rhythm of life that he loved so much because he thought that maybe there are other things that my tradition doesn't teach me. And so he spent a lot of time saying, what is it that the Eastern religions have to teach us? What does meditation in the Eastern sense have to say that meditation in the Western sense might not? And so, amazingly enough, his superiors allowed him to leave the monastery, to go to study, to lecture. And it was during one of those lectures that he died. And so that was the end of his quest, but again, I'm a ways on my quest of trying to figure out how it is that I'm supposed to be holy. But, at your age, there are countless possibilities. And so what we're going to try to explore over the next week or two is what are some ways that the church tries to help us be holy, and how might those help each one of us? Again, blessings on your hump day. I hope you have a great celebration of the Eucharist today, and I'll be back with you tomorrow. And there's no assignment today. Yay.